Rain drizzled against the tall glass window, soft and steady like a lullaby. Inside the small French bistro, the glow of candles danced on polished cutlery, casting warm shadows on the cream-colored walls. The air smelled faintly of thyme and butter, and a pianist at the far end played a gentle, meandering tune. Madeline sat at the table by the window, her posture graceful yet slightly drawn in, as if bracing herself against an invisible weight. Her blonde hair curled gently down her shoulders, soft waves framing a kind face that seemed tired. A white blazer hung neatly on her shoulders, contrasting with the soft burgundy of her blouse. She glanced at her watch. Again, 30 minutes late. She sipped the wine she had barely touched and gave a small, polite smile to the waiter who passed by. Her friend had insisted she try this, one blind date. Just one. He sounds great, Madeline, she had said. He wears a gray coat and works in finance. You need to at least meet him. So she had come. She had waited. And now, she wondered if she had been stood up. The door chimed. She looked up instinctively. A man stepped in, shaking off the rain from his shoulders. He wore a navy work uniform, slightly worn at the cuffs, with a name patch that read, Luke. In his hand, wrapped clumsily in newspaper, was a small bouquet of wildflowers, yellow, violet, and white, damp, but still holding their shape. Luke hesitated at the entrance, scanning the room. He had not meant to come in. He was only here to drop off a water delivery, his side job after janitor shifts ended. But the rain was heavier than he had expected, and the delivery was already done. He just needed somewhere dry to wait it out. A young waiter, new and a little flustered, noticed him. Mistaking his purposeful stance for expectation, he gestured politely and said, "Sir, your party is here. This way, please." Luke blinked, unsure. But before he could speak, the waiter had already turned and gestured toward a table, the one by the window. The one with the woman in the white blazer. Madeline saw him approaching, and for a moment, confusion crossed her face. He looked unsure, almost apologetic, but sat down slowly, clutching the bouquet, like a child holding a gift he did not know how to give. She stared at him. Work uniform, calloused hands, no gray coat. He clearly wasn't the man she was supposed to meet. Still, he sat across from her, eyes steady, kind, and a little wet from the rain. She tilted her head slightly. "I think you've got the wrong table." Luke's eyes widened. He shot up from the chair, nearly knocking his knee into the table. Oh no, I'm so sorry. I thought this was, someone told me." He paused, clutching the flowers, then laughed nervously. "Honestly, I was just trying to stay out of the rain." Madeline looked at him. She saw the rainwater dripping from his sleeves, the bouquet wilting slightly in his hand, and something else, something almost familiar in the way he looked around, like he did not belong. Then she smiled. Not the polite kind. A small, warm, real smile that softened her entire face. She raised her hand gently and said, "Wait." He froze. She leaned forward, voice quiet but sure. "You're not the man I was supposed to meet," she said, "but..." She looked at the empty seat across from her, at the flowers, then back up into his face. "I hope you don't leave." Their eyes met. The piano behind them played a soft, lingering note. And for the first time that evening, the moment didn't feel like waiting anymore. A waiter returned to the table, eyes flicking between the pair uncertainly. Madeline caught his look and raised her hand slightly. "Would you like to order something?" she asked, turning to Luke. He hesitated, his fingers tightening slightly around the damp bouquet. "No, I don't want to." "Please," she interrupted gently. "Think of it as payment for being accidentally seated." He let out a small chuckle, nodding. "All right, just soup and some bread, if they have it." The waiter noted it quickly and left. Luke peeled off his thin, worn gloves, laying them carefully on the edge of the table. His hands were calloused, the kind that had gripped cold metal tools and carried heavy buckets for years. They looked out of place next to the polished cutlery and white linen napkins. They began talking, starting with the weather and the storm outside, the kind of small talk that fills the space between strangers, but it did not stay small for long. Madeline tilted her head, eyeing the bouquet now resting on the table. "So, the flowers, who are they for?" Luke smiled, almost sheepishly. "My daughter picked them, said I should give them to someone kind." Madeline laughed, a soft and surprised sound. Then, without ceremony, she reached across the table and took the bouquet, placing it carefully into her water glass. The wild flowers tilted sideways, still damp from the rain, but in that glass, they looked like they belonged. It was a small gesture, but something shifted. Luke leaned back slightly, his expression warming. Her name's Ava, 6 years old, thinks pink dresses are mandatory attire and refuses to eat pancakes unless they're strawberry. Madeline grinned. She sounds like a handful. She is, he said proudly. She has a stuffed bear named Sir Muffin. He runs her kingdom. She laughed again, this time resting her chin lightly on her hand. I like that. Luke paused, then added, Last winter, our power went out during a cold snap. We had to build a fake fireplace out of tea lights and a frying pan. Read fairy tales under a blanket fort by flashlight. Madeline's smile softened. Her eyes lingered on him, brown irises glistening beneath a lock of hair that had fallen across her cheek. The warmth of the candles made her look younger, less guarded. I haven't laughed like this in a long time, she murmured. Luke looked down at the bowl of onion soup now in front of him, steam curling into the air. He stirred it slowly and said quietly, I don't think people are supposed to laugh when they're being a dad, a mom, and a plumber, every night. He looked up and met her gaze, something vulnerable in his voice. But Ava, she makes me believe I can. At that very moment, just outside the restaurant, a man in a gray coat approached the entrance. He paused before stepping inside, glancing through the window. He saw Madeline, laughing softly, sitting across from a man he could not clearly see. Her face glowed in the candlelight. The way she leaned forward, the bouquet of wildflowers on the table, it looked like a date already in progress. The man stepped back. A beat passed. Then, without entering, he turned and walked away, leaving no message behind. Back inside, the rain continued to tap gently against the glass. Madeline leaned back in her chair. I was engaged once, she said suddenly. Her tone had changed, quieter, more fragile. We had just signed the papers for our house when the accident happened. He was gone before we moved in. I never even unpacked. Luke did not say anything. Instead, he reached for a napkin, folded it carefully, and handed it to her without a word. She accepted it, eyes shimmering. I didn't think anyone could understand that kind of loss, she whispered, voice catching. Not until tonight. They did not speak for a while. There was no need. When the check came, neither moved to take it right away. They sat there for 15 more minutes after the meal was paid for, not because of the food, not out of politeness, but because neither of them wanted to be the first to stand. The fluorescent lights on the 33rd floor buzzed faintly, casting a sterile glow on the polished marble. It was almost midnight. The office was quiet, emptied of executives and assistants, the hum of computers silenced for the night. Luke stepped off the service elevator, mop bucket rolling behind him. The floor was always spotless here, gleaming, untouched, but tonight, it felt different, heavy. He had not expected to be assigned to this floor. He usually cleaned lower levels, restrooms, break rooms, stairwells. But tonight, a leak in the executive pantry had caused water to trail down the hallway. Maintenance had called it in, and Luke had been asked to handle it. As he pushed the door open, the soft clink of ceramics startled him. Madeline was standing near the window, sorting through a stack of manila folders, her back turned. A half-finished cup of coffee rested on the table beside her. She wore no jacket now, just a soft gray blouse and slacks. Her hair, looser than before, caught the office light in golden waves. She turned and saw him. For a second, no one moved. No piano music this time, no candlelight, just silence and white LED. Luke took off his cap slowly and lowered his gaze. Ma'am. She looked at him, really looked. The uniform, the mop, the familiar face in an unfamiliar context. You know now, she said softly. I always knew, he replied, voice calm. Madeline blinked. What? Luke met her eyes. I clean this floor every night. I've seen your name on the door. But at the restaurant, you didn't look like a CEO. You looked like someone who didn't want to be alone. She stood frozen, cup in hand. And you, she said, her tone unreadable, didn't look like someone who cleaned floors. He smiled faintly. That night, You didn't treat me like someone who did." There was no accusation in his voice, no bitterness, only quiet honesty. "I'm the guy who mops your office, takes out the trash, wipes fingerprints off the glass. But that night," he paused, then added gently, "you called me a friend." Madeline looked away. Her hand tightened slightly on the coffee cup. A beat passed. Then another. Luke didn't move. Neither did she. There were no angry words, no awkward explanations. Just a moment, suspended between two people who had met without labels, and now stood in the full light of them. She finally spoke, barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry." He nodded, once. "Don't be." He turned, pushing the mop bucket softly toward the pantry. As he walked past her, the scent of rain seemed to follow him, faint, distant, like memory. Behind him, Madeline stood still. In her eyes, not guilt, but something far heavier. Regret. The rain was back again, heavier than before, drumming steadily on the rooftop of the high-rise. The city lights shimmered through the downpour, and the building's lobby echoed with the soft squeak of wet shoes and the hum of elevators. Luke shifted Ava's backpack higher on his shoulder as they stepped into the service entrance. She was running a low fever after lunch, her teacher had explained over the phone. Nothing serious, but best to let her rest. He had tried everyone, neighbors, friends, even the night shift lady at the corner store. No one could take her in on such short notice. So here they were, Ava bundled in her pink raincoat, rubber boots squeaking with every step. He brought her to the small employee break room on the third floor, warmed her up with a blanket and a chocolate milk from the vending machine. "You stay here, all right?" he said, kneeling in front of her. "Color in your book. I'll just be upstairs for a little while." She nodded solemnly, pink headband slightly askew over her wispy bangs. "Can Sir Muffin color too?" "Of course," Luke said, tapping her nose. "But only if he stays in the lines." He closed the door gently behind him and hurried to the service elevator. Ava stayed still for about 4 minutes. Then she wandered out. The door to the CEO's office opened with a quiet click. Madeline looked up from her laptop, startled. And there, standing in the middle of her polished office, was a little girl in a pink dress and sparkly boots, holding a crayon in one hand and a battered stuffed bear in the other. Ava walked right in, unfazed. She stepped up to the desk, pulled out a sticky note, and began drawing a cat. A very round, very yellow cat. Madeline blinked, stunned. Hello?" Ava looked up at her, eyes wide. "Are you a princess?" she asked, matter-of-factly. Madeline blinked again. "What?" "Your hair," Ava pointed. "It's gold and curly, like the mom in my fairy tale book." A laugh escaped Madeline, loud, sudden, and completely unguarded. She covered her mouth with her hand, then let it drop as she looked at the small visitor. "Well," she said, setting aside her coffee, "no one's called me a princess in a while." "You're pretty like a painting," Ava continued, climbing into one of the armchairs with her crayon and bear. "Are you rich?" Madeline burst out laughing again, and this time she sat down on the floor next to the little girl. "I work a lot. That's kind of like being rich," she said with a grin. They sat together on the floor, heads bent over sticky notes, drawing lopsided animals. Sir Muffin supervised from a nearby cushion. It was then that the door opened sharply. Luke stood in the doorway, breathless, eyes darting across the room. "Ava." She looked up. "Daddy, look, I found the princess." He hurried forward, crouching beside her. "You cannot run off like that, sweetheart." "You scared me." "I wanted to find the bathroom," she explained. "Then I found her." Luke turned to Madeline, face flushed with embarrassment. "I am so sorry. She's usually good with rules." But Madeline waved a hand gently. "It's all right. She's a delight." Then, looking at Ava with warmth, "You have a very brave explorer here." Ava giggled and handed her a sticky note with a stick figure holding a cat. "It's you. I made your hair shiny." Madeline took it with a smile, her fingers brushing the child's. Then, softly, she said the words that made Luke pause. "She's a lovely little girl. Bacon." Luke blinked. He had heard that tone before, the kind that people used when they truly saw someone. He looked at Madeline, and this time, there was no CEO in front of him. Just a woman sitting cross-legged on her office floor, holding a drawing from a child like it was a priceless painting. And smiling, like she meant it. Monday morning brought a storm of another kind. The company's top executives were gathered for an important visit. Chester Rollins, the newest strategic investor, was touring the building. A towering figure from the banking world, Rollins was known for his sharp tongue, sharper suits, and an outlook that belonged firmly to another era. On most days, Luke would have been off shift by now. But a leak in the upper plumbing had trickled all the way to the 33rd floor. With the maintenance team already stretched thin, he was called in for an unusual day shift. He brought Ava with him. She had woken up, sniffling, her temperature just high enough to keep her home from school. With no one else to watch her, he gently packed a backpack full of books and snacks and set her up in the employee break room with a blanket and her stuffed bear. When Madeline found out, she said nothing, just nodded, and quietly left a cup of warm ginger tea on the table beside Ava. Upstairs, Luke got to work. Kneeling under the executive pantry sink, sleeves rolled up, shirt damp with effort, he barely noticed the elevator chime. Chester Rollins stepped out, flanked by 2 senior VPs and a PR manager. They moved with crisp shoes and clipped voices. The moment Rollins spotted Luke crouched beneath the countertop, his face twisted. Luke looked up, offered a nod, and said politely, "Good morning, sir." Rollins didn't return the greeting. He turned to his entourage, gesturing toward Luke as if pointing at a misplaced crate. "The 33rd floor is for executives," he barked. "Why is this kind of person crawling around up here like it's a janitor's closet?" The hallway froze. The PR manager stepped forward quickly. "He's here to fix a water issue, Mr. Rollins. It's already been addressed." Rollins didn't stop. He gave Luke a sweeping look, soaked pants, stained gloves, sweat along the brow. Then, with a smirk, said louder, "No wonder the stock price has been slipping. You've got guys like him parading through your executive floor. Standards must be dropping." At that exact moment, a soft sound of footsteps echoed behind them. Ava appeared from around the corner, still in her pink dress, bear in hand, rubbing her eyes. She had been looking for the restroom. Instead, she found her father frozen, half standing, surrounded by men in suits. She looked up at Rollins, confused. Then, at Luke. Luke slowly rose to his feet. Madeline had stepped out of her office during the commotion. She stood just a few steps away, having heard everything. Luke's eyes found hers. There it was, one of those moments that didn't last long but felt like it carried the weight of a year. Everyone turned toward Madeline, waiting. For her to say something, for her to push back. But she hesitated. Her eyes flickered between Luke and Rollins, lips parting slightly as if to speak, but no words came. She looked away. She said nothing. Luke saw it all. He did not speak either. Not to Rollins, not to Madeline. He simply turned to Ava and offered his hand. "Come on, sweetheart," he said softly. That evening, after putting Ava to bed, Luke packed up his tools into an old cardboard box. His gloves, his mop, a few rags. He placed a sealed envelope on the building's front desk. His resignation. No note. No call to Madeline. Just silence. In their tiny apartment, Ava sat on the couch, drawing on the back of an old flyer. "Daddy?" she asked. "We're not going back to the place with the big windows?" Luke didn't look up from folding his work shirt. "No, baby girl," he said. "Sometimes princesses live in castles where people like us are not supposed to go." On the 33rd floor, the office lights glowed long after the last visitor left. Madeline sat at her desk, still in her work clothes, the unopened email still on her screen. Luke. Chambers. Voluntary resignation. She reached for the cup of ginger tea she had made that morning, for Ava, but it was cold now. On the edge of her desk sat the 3-color paper bouquet Ava had given her. She picked it up gently. Her eyes were glassy, rimmed red, but the tears never fell. A week passed. Luke did not return. The cleaning crew still came, of course, on time, in rotation, efficient to a fault. They left the 33rd floor gleaming. Desks were dusted, trash bins emptied, even the coffee rings near the copier vanished before morning. But the silence lingered, hollow in all the wrong places. The rhythm was still there, but the pulse was gone. Madeline noticed it more than she admitted. The quiet was louder than usual. Her office felt larger, but not in a freeing way. The window, once a source of clarity, now just offered reflections she did not want to see. She buried herself in work. Her calendar stayed full. Meetings blended into one another. Decisions stacked like files on her desk. She responded to emails with such precision, her assistant joked she must be reading them telepathically. Numbers were reviewed, strategies refined, goals sharpened to razor points. Her team praised her focus. She knew better. It was not clarity, it was avoidance. She had traded vulnerability for productivity, again. The flowers on her desk had long since wilted. The wild bouquet Luke once offered was gone, but its ghost lingered in her memory. How it looked clumsily set in a glass of water, bright and honest. And the little things, the faint scent of rain and soap on his jacket, the scuff marks under the conference table, wiped with quiet care. The way Ava's laughter had once echoed down the hallway like bells no one meant to ring, but missed the moment they stopped. Madeline began to dread the 33rd floor. She stayed later at night, kept the lights on longer, trying to fill the space with tasks, numbers, noise, but nothing settled the strange ache just beneath her ribs. Then, one late afternoon, just before the sky began to burn gold, her intercom buzzed. "Miss Kingsley?" The front desk clerk's voice came through, tentative. "There's something here. It's marked personal. For you." She blinked. "From whom?" He didn't leave a name, just said it was for you. Dropped it off a few hours ago. She hesitated, then stood,